You are not on the guest list. Please leave the area immediately.
I was on the list of those willing to die for this country.
2 guards asked Black Marine to leave his son's graduation. Then 6 SEALs silenced the room. The voice cut through the murmur, sharp and sudden, like a crack of ice on a still lake. "Sir, you need to move. Now." John Carter, a Black Marine, sat ramrod straight in the 3rd row, his eyes fixed on the empty stage, refusing to acknowledge the 2 figures now eclipsing his view. His uniform, meticulously pressed, felt suddenly heavy. A ripple of discomfort, subtle yet pervasive, began to spread from his immediate vicinity. The whispers dying down, replaced by a collective hush. He didn't flinch, didn't even turn his head, but the tension in the space around him escalated, thick and suffocating. The air, pregnant with the promise of graduation, now thrummed with something else, entirely confrontation. John Carter knew the weight of a uniform, the respect it commanded, and sometimes the scrutiny it drew. He was a man shaped by purpose, his calm demeanor carrying the quiet authority of a seasoned individual. For 15 years, he had served in the Marine Corps, deploying to Afghanistan and Iraq, returning with commendations and the kind of silent understanding that only comes from facing the abyss. After his service, he'd transitioned into private security, a steady, reliable career that allowed him to be present for his son. Today, however, his focus was solely on David. He'd driven 8 hours from Temple, Texas, the miles melting away with each thought of seeing his son walk across that stage. Before leaving, he'd meticulously polished his uniform boots, not for show, but out of habit, a ritual that grounded him. Tucked safely in his wallet was a worn photograph of his late wife, Sarah, cradling a baby David, a constant reminder of the promise he'd made her a vow to always be there for their son, no matter what. Upon arriving at the Elmridge High Gym, the atmosphere was a mix of nervous energy and joyful anticipation. He presented his ticket at the door, a blue laminated pass, and was directed to a family seating area in the 3rd row. He noticed other attendees giving his uniform curious, sometimes admiring glances. It was a familiar experience for him, and he simply offered a slight nod in return. As the first notes of pomp and circumstance began to swell, followed by the solemn opening of the national anthem, John stood tall, his presence a silent salute. His thoughts drifted to Sarah, imagining her bright smile and the pride that would have swelled in her chest just as it was now swelling in his. He closed his eyes for a moment, picturing her reactions to the ceremony, to David, to this milestone they had always planned to witness together. But the moment of peace was abruptly interrupted. 2 figures, not school administrators or even police officers, but private security guards, appeared beside his row. One was short and broad-shouldered, his name tag reading Mike. The other, tall and lanky, was named Tom. They looked official enough in their dark uniforms, but their demeanor was less about assistance and more about assertion. "Excuse me, sir," Mike began, his voice gravelly. "You'll need to move." John opened his eyes, turning his head slowly to face them. "Pardon me, this section is reserved for immediate family of graduating seniors," Tom added, gesturing vaguely around them. "And it's full." John remained calm. "I have a ticket for this section," he said, reaching into his blazer pocket and producing the laminated pass. He held it out for them to see. "My son David Carter is graduating today." Mike glanced at the ticket dismissively, not bothering to take it. "Doesn't matter, sir. The section is full. We need you to move to the back. There's plenty of standing room there. John's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He had driven 8 hours. He had made a promise. I drove 8 hours to see my son graduate from this seat. He stated, his voice quiet but firm. I'm not moving. The situation began to draw attention. A few heads turned in the rows around them, their murmurs growing louder. The guards, seemingly emboldened by the small audience, became more insistent. Look, sir, Mike said, his voice dropping slightly, I think you'd be more comfortable in the back. It's less crowded. The phrase hung in the air, a subtle, almost imperceptible inflection that John recognized instantly. It wasn't just about seating. It was a coded suggestion, a dismissal based on his race. He knew it, and he knew they knew he knew it. He simply met Mike's gaze, unblinking. I asked for your name. Mike pressed his tone, hardening. Are you a police officer? I am a private security officer, sir. John corrected, his voice still, even though a steeliness had entered his eyes. And I've already stated I am not moving. Tom stepped forward closer to John. If you don't comply, we'll have to escort you out. We don't want to make a scene. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. John, still seated, simply looked from one guard to the other, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched thick with unspoken challenge, and the tension in the gymnasium ratcheted up another notch, threatening to snap. The standoff held a silent contest of wills, played out amidst the sounds of restless students and the distant strains of the school band tuning up. John's stillness was unnerving, a quiet defiance that seemed to confound the two guards. Mike and Tom exchanged a quick, uncertain glance, their initial bluster beginning to falter under John's unwavering gaze. They had expected an argument, perhaps a raised voice, something they could readily categorize and control. Instead, they were met with an almost unsettling calm, a man who seemed to radiate an unshakable conviction. Sir, we're giving you one last chance. Tom announced, his voice lacking some of its earlier confidence. He even took a half step back, perhaps, sensing the unease their actions were stirring among the other parents. Several attendees were now openly staring, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. A few whispers started to circulate, questions about the disturbance, about why a seemingly respectable man in uniform was being harassed. John remained silent, his hands resting calmly on his knees, his eyes fixed on the empty stage as if the guards were merely inconvenient shadows. He had faced down far greater threats in his life, and two overzealous security guards, however irritating, barely registered on his personal threat assessment scale. His goal remained singular: to witness his son's graduation from this seat, a promise kept. Just as the silence threatened to become unbearable, a woman 2 rows behind John spoke up, her voice clear and cutting through the hushed tension. What's the problem here? He has a ticket. Why are you bothering him? Mike, visibly annoyed by the interruption, turned to face her. Ma'am, this is a private matter. Please stay out of it. It's not a private matter when you're disrupting a public event, she retorted, her voice gaining strength. Others began to chime in, a growing chorus of discontent. Let him sit. He's not doing anything wrong. The murmur was turning into a low rumble of dissent, directed squarely at the two guards. This was an unforeseen complication for Mike and Tom, who had likely anticipated a swift, quiet resolution. They were used to people complying, not questioning. The guards, now flustered, tried to regain control. This is a security issue, Mike insisted, though his voice was less commanding than before. "We have procedures to follow." John chose this moment to speak, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the rising clamor. "My ticket states seat D12 row 3. I am in seat D12 row 3. I have not violated any rules. My son is graduating, and I intend to witness it from the seat I was assigned." His words were simple, factual, and impossible to refute, further solidifying the growing support for him in the audience. The logical, unassailable nature of his statement seemed to deflate some of the guards' remaining authority. They looked at each other again, a silent debate passing between them, clearly unsure of their next move. Their attempt to intimidate had backfired. Instead of isolating John, they had inadvertently rallied others to his side. The pressure was mounting, and the guards were beginning to feel the heat. Just as the tension within the gymnasium reached a palpable peak, threatening to boil over, a subtle shift occurred. 6 men moving with an almost imperceptible coordination had quietly entered the gym and taken seats in the rows behind John, their presence initially unnoticed amidst the ongoing commotion. They weren't in uniform, dressed in civilian clothes, but their composed postures, discerning gazes, and an almost preternatural stillness immediately set them apart from the restless crowd. John, without even turning his head, felt their arrival. He recognized them not by sight, though he would have instantly, but by an instinct honed in the crucible of shared danger. These were Navy SEALs, brothers-in-arms men he had led, fought alongside, and in some cases, saved. A deep, resonant voice, calm, but carrying an undeniable weight, cut through the escalating exchange between the guards and the now vocal audience. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" All eyes snapped towards the speaker. It was Ryan Jenkins, one of the 6 men. He sat 2 rows back, his gaze fixed on Mike and Tom, a quiet intensity in his eyes that spoke volumes. Ryan was the one John had pulled from the wreckage in Kandahar, a bond forged in fire and blood. His presence immediately shifted the dynamic in the room. The guards, who had been struggling to control a vocal crowd, now found themselves facing an entirely different kind of challenge. Ryan's voice, though not loud, carried the absolute authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, his tone conveying a profound lack of patience for petty power plays. "This man," Ryan continued, gesturing subtly towards John with a tilt of his head, "appears to be simply sitting in his assigned seat. Why are you bothering him?" His question was a statement, a challenge veiled in civility. Mike, initially taken aback, tried to regain his footing. "Sir, this is a school security matter. He's disrupting the ceremony, and this section is full." He gestured again to the empty seats directly beside John, a clear contradiction. Ryan's gaze hardened. "Disrupting, he's sitting there quietly. You, however, are creating quite a disturbance." His words were delivered with a precise, almost surgical calm that stripped the guards of any remaining authority. "And as for full, I see several empty seats right here." He gestured to the seats in John's row, directly refuting their fabricated claim. The other 5 men, equally composed, began to subtly adjust their postures. Carlos Rivera, Daniel Reed, Mark Lim, Samuel Horton, and another unnamed SEAL all shifted their movements, subtle but significant, a silent reinforcement of Ryan's stance. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible display of readiness, a silent promise of overwhelming force should it become necessary. They weren't threatening, not overtly, but the message was clear. John was not alone. He was backed by a cohesive, highly capable unit. Ryan's voice dropped, becoming a low, dangerous growl that was barely audible to anyone but the guards. "I advise you not to touch him, or any of us. You'll find that to be a mistake you won't easily recover from." It was a warning delivered with the chilling precision of a man who had seen and done things the guards could only imagine. The underlying threat was unmistakable, an implicit reference to a level of training and cohesion far beyond anything the two security guards could comprehend. This was not a negotiation, it was a directive. The guards, finally understanding the true nature of the men they were facing, exchanged another look. This one laced with fear and a dawning realization of their profound misjudgment. The air, which had been thick with tension, now hummed with a different kind of energy, one of quiet power and unshakable loyalty. The game had irrevocably changed. The silence that followed Ryan's low warning was absolute, a stark contrast to the earlier clamor. The two security guards, Mike and Tom, were visibly shaken. Their faces, previously set with a petty authority, now looked pale and uncertain. They exchanged frantic, silent glances, the unspoken question clear: what do we do now? The sheer composure and implicit threat from Ryan and the other men had stripped them of their bravado, leaving them exposed and outmatched. They were no longer dealing with a lone, quiet man, but with a unified, formidable force whose capabilities were clearly far beyond anything they were equipped to handle. Ryan simply held their gaze, his expression unyielding. He didn't need to say more. The message had been delivered with devastating clarity. The other 5 SEALs, in their seemingly casual postures, projected an aura of readiness that was both subtle and terrifying. They weren't moving, weren't even looking directly at the guards, yet their collective presence was a palpable weight in the room. It was the silent promise of disciplined, overwhelming action, a force capable of turning a simple high school graduation into something entirely different, should the need arise. Mike, visibly flustered, cleared his throat. We were just following protocol, sir." His voice was thin, a stark contrast to his earlier gravelly tone. "Your protocol seems to involve harassing a decorated Marine and disrupting a public event." Ryan stated, his voice still low but now laced with a cold sarcasm. "Perhaps you should reevaluate your procedures." He didn't raise his voice, but every word carried the weight of an iron hammer. Tom, the lanky one, finally spoke, his voice almost a squeak. We understand, sir. There's no need for further complications." He seemed to be pleading, not threatening. "No, there isn't," Ryan agreed, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Now I suggest you return to your posts and ensure no further complications arise." The implication was clear: back down or face the consequences. The two guards, thoroughly intimidated, nodded quickly, their earlier bluster completely gone. They mumbled a hasty apology almost in unison, and then retreated, practically scurrying away from the section, their defeat palpable. The immediate threat had passed, diffused not by shouting or physical confrontation, but by the silent collective power of unwavering loyalty. A flashback revealed the profound bond between John and these men, a bond forged in the crucible of war. 15 years prior in Kandahar, Afghanistan, John, then a gunnery sergeant, and his unit had been ambushed. It was a brutal, chaotic scene, the ground erupting from an IED, followed by a relentless hail of gunfire. In the midst of the chaos, John, without hesitation, had risked his own life. He'd seen Ryan Jenkins pinned under wreckage, a twisted mess of metal and dust, and without a second thought, he'd run through a hail of bullets to pull him free, his powerful frame straining against the weight. He'd then crawled back under relentless fire to provide cover for Carlos Rivera and Daniel Reed, who were desperately trying to suppress the enemy. He remembered pulling Mark Lim, disoriented and wounded, behind cover and helping Samuel Horton apply a tourniquet to a bleeding comrade. That harrowing experience, that shared moment of extreme vulnerability and selfless heroism, had forged an unbreakable bond of loyalty among them. They were not just colleagues. They were family bound by the raw, undeniable truth of combat. They knew implicitly that if John ever needed anything at any time in any place, they would be there. No questions asked, no explanations needed. It was a pact sealed in blood and trust. Meanwhile, from his position in the graduating line, David had observed the entire confrontation. He saw his father's unwavering composure, a look he'd seen before when his father faced adversity, a quiet strength that always seemed to diffuse situations even when they looked insurmountable. He recognized the two guards known for their overzealousness and a tendency to target minority students and their families. He watched as the 6 men quietly rose from their seats, their collective presence shifting the dynamic. He didn't know who they were, but he knew instinctively that they were not just random parents. They moved with a shared purpose, a silent understanding, and David realized that they were men who shared a deep connection with his father, men who, in the language of his dad, had his back. A mix of fierce pride and a burning sense of injustice welled up inside him, pushing down the tears that threatened to fall. He wanted to rush over to defend his father, but a lifetime of watching John's quiet dignity held him in place. He swallowed hard, his own resolve hardening. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. The earlier festive air had been replaced by a quiet sense of awe and curiosity. All eyes, it seemed, were now on John and the men who stood with him, a silent testament to the power of their presence. When David's name was finally called, David Carter, a wave of applause erupted from the audience. But it was the coordinated, forceful applause of the 6 SEALs that stood out, a powerful, synchronized clap that resonated through the gym. It wasn't just applause, it was a silent salute, a powerful acknowledgement of both David and his father, a clear message of respect and validation. David, filled with an overwhelming surge of pride and a newfound understanding of the quiet strength that defined his father, walked across the stage, his eyes meeting his father's in a shared moment of profound understanding. He saw the pride in John's eyes, and in that moment, all the injustice faded, replaced by an unbreakable connection. The climax arrived not in a crescendo of noise, but in a profound silence. As David's name echoed through the gymnasium, the applause from the audience was strong, but the coordinated rhythmic clap of the 6 SEALs was a distinct, powerful drumbeat. It wasn't just noise, it was a statement. Each clap was precise, deliberate, a silent salute that cut through the general din, drawing all eyes to John and the men standing behind him. This was their message, delivered not with words, but with a unified act of respect and recognition. David, his diploma clutched in his hand, walked across the stage, his gaze locking with his father's. In that shared glance, a lifetime of lessons passed between them, resilience, dignity, and the quiet power of unwavering support. David's chest swelled with pride, a silent acknowledgement of the strength and honor that defined his father and, by extension, himself. He knew instinctively that this moment was more than just a graduation. It was a testament to courage, loyalty, and standing firm in the face of injustice. After the ceremony, the sea of graduating students and their families began to disperse. John waited patiently by the gym exit, a familiar, easy smile now gracing his lips. David, having navigated the joyous chaos of congratulations, finally reached him. The younger man's eyes were still alight with the fire of indignation. "Dad," David began, his voice low and intense, "I was so ready to come down there. I saw them. I was going to tell them off." His fists clenched, a residual anger simmering beneath the surface. John placed a hand gently on David's shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "I know you were son, and I appreciate it, but I didn't need you to react with anger because I knew I could handle it. And you, David, you handled your own moment with dignity. That's what matters." He paused, then gestured subtly to the now departing SEALs, who offered John a series of quiet nods and shared glances of mutual respect. "Those men," John continued, "they're the ones I bled with. They understand loyalty. They understand what it means to truly have someone's back." He then reached into his wallet, pulling out the worn photograph of Sarah Young and vibrant holding baby David. He held it out for his son to see. "This," he said, his voice softer now, "this is what's worth protecting. Your mother made me promise to always be there for you, and I intend to keep that promise always. True strength, David, isn't in shouting or reacting with anger, even when that anger is justified. It's in quiet dignity. It's in unwavering presence, and it's in knowing who stands with you truly. Anger makes noise, but silence cuts deeper. Dignity sticks longer." David looked at the photograph, then back at his father, the anger slowly receding, replaced by a profound understanding. He saw the wisdom in his father's words, a lesson learned not just from a single incident, but from a lifetime of quiet resilience. He realized that true manhood wasn't about making noise, but about how one carried oneself, especially when faced with adversity. The incident, rather than marring the day, had instead provided a powerful, unforgettable lesson. It was a testament to honor, respect, and the unshakable power of unwavering loyalty. The memory of the two guards, dismissed and forgotten, faded into the background, overshadowed by the enduring image of a Marine and his son, standing tall, surrounded by the silent support of men who understood the true meaning of brotherhood.